We're back with Gabby and Roger, Team Rising. We got a new Quinnipiac poll out of California that's looking pretty interesting here. Kamala Harris has to be very happy. Joe Biden has to be very not so happy. She has jumped in the poll here and now is beating Joe Biden. Of course, this is our home state. And of course, it is one poll, so we don't want to make too much of it. It's got a margin of error of almost 6 percentage points, so always important to factor that in as well. Yeah. But Gabby, what do you make of the state of the Democratic race at this point?
It's certainly interesting that Senator Harris is doing so well after that first debate performance. I think a lot of people expected that she would rise, but to see her leading in California over somebody like Joe Biden, especially when you look at some of the other responses in this poll on electability in particular, people still think, I think it was 53% of voters in California think that Joe Biden is the most electable candidate. And when you look at so many other polls, what is the top priority for Democrats? It's beating Donald Trump. Yeah. So to see somebody like Senator Harris doing well and yet having a lot of excitement among voters at the possibility that she might be the Democratic nominee, but then turning and looking at how they feel about Joe Biden going up against Trump, I just think it's an interesting dynamic and somewhat contradictory for Democratic voters to be, so excited about a candidate that they actually don't think ultimately would do as well against the incumbent.
That is a really interesting dynamic. What do you make of this, Roger? Because Gabby's right, which is if Joe Biden is, in their view, the most electable person, and then they're going with their home state senator Kamala Harris, they could be shooting themselves in the foot, right?
Yeah, I mean, home state polls are very interesting. Yeah. To look at it just through the California-centric lens for a second, she should take great comfort in this, because I remember, maybe you could remind me, about 2 months ago there was a poll that actually had her fourth in her home state.
In her own home state.
And if you're underwater in your home state, for example, Gore not winning Tennessee, you've got some serious problems. And I don't think any of the other medium to upper tier candidates, or at least those that are still in elected office, are facing the same situation. I think we could all safely say that each of them would win their own home state. I think what she still needs to do is, and she's rising at the right time, right? You don't want to peak too early, and you don't want to peak too late. And I think what they need to do is take this debate moment, obviously use it for fundraising, try to equal it in the second debate. But what you want here is like a slow burn, right? You don't want to accelerate so quick that then you burn through everything in your gas tank, and then all of a sudden it's Thanksgiving.
If that's the strategy, though, I mean, Bernie Sanders at 18% and Elizabeth Warren at 16% both have massive amounts of cash on hand.
And grassroots following.
That's what I think is the most interesting part here, right?
I think that there's been a little bit post-debate of a potential weakness exposed for Senator Harris. And of course, now that she is rising the polls, she becomes much more of a target. But, she had to walk back her position on Medicare for all. She had to walk back some of her position on busing. And as she continues to surge in the polls, she's not going to get a pass for those things.
No, she's not. You can expect that Joe Biden is probably going to come into the second debate, assuming they're on the same stage again, ready to hit back at her.
And Bernie Sanders on Medicare for all.
Yeah, for sure.
No, absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting is that in that same Quinnipiac poll, people felt as though Elizabeth Warren was leading the pack in terms of policy proposals. And I know that's sort of conventional wisdom at this point. She is the policy candidate in the Democratic field. But I think it was only like 4% who thought that Senator Harris had put forward smart policy proposals, and that's going to hurt her eventually if she continues to rise.
That is a problem.
I saw that on the Breakfast Club. But speaking of the debates here, we have the live draw from CNN tonight at 8 p.m. Basically, the candidates are in 3 different pools, the first and second tier. Noteworthy, actually, that they put Andrew Yang in a second tier of candidates, which is a pretty big deal given his polling, and I think in the latest New Hampshire poll, which was 5%. So the draws are basically going to take place.
2% in California here.
The first draw will have 10 candidates, and with many of the lower polls. The second draw will have 6 from everyone from Cory Booker to Andrew Yang, and then the final draw are really the top dogs, the Joe Biden and the Elizabeth Warren. I think, Roger, we talked about this before, which is whenever it comes to these debates, isn't it a disservice to spread the top tier candidates out from one another. Because what we really want to see is what we were just talking about. We want to see Biden, Bernie, Warren, and Kamala Harris slog it out. And nobody wants to hear Eric Swalwell like piping in from
She
don't have to
already
worry about
dropped
that.
down, so
Right.
don't worry.
Right, well, that's what I mean. I mean, like nothing was added for us except for our amusement at laughing at him during that debate.
Well, if people
Yeah.
if people want that outcome, then they should change the rules and the criteria.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is
I
all
also
up to
remember that we've
everything,
touched-
right, yeah.
Either if you have a threshold, then you have a threshold, and whoever makes it gets in. To take your logic, then at this point in the last cycle, then Trump wouldn't have been on the stage, right? Because he was at 1%.
Well, he was in the first debate. So
But I'm saying
from a
it
time
was a
frame
different
perspective.
threshold, too.
I mean, the state of the race and all that, but different.
Right,
I mean,
but
if you
what
do
I'm
it by the
saying
first
is
debate.
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
like we deny ourselves a full and kind of robust conversation when we just buy into this idea of certain tiers. And I've said this before, but in 2 months it's going to be September. The equivalent in the first presidential campaign I worked with would be September of 2003, and John Kerry was polling below Al Sharpton at that point.
Yeah.
So if we went down the road of let's just talk to the big dogs, then the very same person who won the caucus 100 days later wouldn't have been on the debate stage.
Yeah.
So I think that's if we're going to have rules and we're going to have criteria and thresholds, then let's abide by the rules
Yeah.
and the criteria and the
I
thresholds.
agree with Roger. I like having a broad field, being able to make the case. I think Tulsi Gabbard has a really interesting voice on, opposing interventionism. I think it's good to hear those voices. One thing that's also notable here, though, is first of all, in the poll we were looking at earlier, Pete Buttigieg, again, this is another poll where he's way down at 3%, and he's slotted into the second tier as well. So him and Andrew Yang and other candidates, Julian Castro, Amy Klobuchar, he's being put in the same pool as that group, Beto O'Rourke, rather than the top tier. Has the media undercovered the fact that Buttigieg seems to be falling off here a little bit and his moment kind of seems to have passed?
Well, I would actually push back against that because if you looked at his fundraising numbers, he led the Democratic field in the second quarter. I mean, he beat Joe Biden with his fundraising numbers. So you could say that he's not getting, the same glowing profiles that he was 2 months ago, and he's not getting as much attention or airwave time. But he is leading the field in terms of enthusiasm behind him and monetary advantage.
Right.
Elite enthusiasm.
Right.
Let's be very
and
specific.
that's what people always say here, which is, I mean, every time we talk about this here, which is money matters. I mean, you can organize and start a huge organization. You can basically replace the grassroots support that Bernie has because of how much money you have.
And I think that one thing that we're going to see over the coming months, because Buttigieg has sort of expanded his staff just in the last week. I know that he's hired a bunch of new campaign volunteers and staffers in Iowa and New Hampshire. Yes, he had his moment and it sort of died down, but I think we will sort of see him rise again. And if he does well in the debate performance later this month, that's going to help
I would
him.
say that this debate is going to be very important for him.
Absolutely.
He needs to stand out and show that there's more to him than just being able to get rich people to give him money.
May I tie together two subjects?
Please.
I think Buttigieg and Harris are at roughly the same point, which is the biography got them to the dance, right? And now the question is like, can you lay out an actual vision of the next 5 or 10 years of what how is America going to succeed and function and grow and learn, and then fill in the block and tackling kind of steps that lay out, kind of the legislative underpinnings of something like that. The good news is that they've got to that point where people are kind of leaning towards them and wanting that next chapter of that story.
Yeah.
Because the whole game right now is to get the eyeballs and the clicks, right? So now the question is like, can they capitalize on that? And then can they go into the fall harmonizing the personality, which they both have roughly established, and then the organization and the vision and the enthusiasm, and can they make sure that all starts to crest in that first 1 or 2 weeks of January? That's really the challenge for them specifically and for the field in general.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to leave it there.
Thank you,
guys.
Great panel. Appreciate you guys.
Tomorrow on Rising, Rhode Island Congressman David Cicilline discusses his thoughts on tech antitrust hearings and immigration raids.
And President of Republican Main Street Partnership, Sarah Chamberlain, updates us on the advocacy of her Women to Women tours. Be sure, also, important news, check out our friend Jamal's news show, Why You Should Care, or Whisk as we like to call it here. You'll find that and us on YouTube. Jamal's show provides 3 jam-packed minutes of engaging analysis on the most important stories of the day. If you want to know what's going on, watch Jamal on Whisk.
Hit subscribe.
Yes, hit
Wherever
subscribe
wherever
and
the
the little
button is.
bell and all that good stuff. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.